Welcome everyone. I'd like to thank everyone for being here for the Foundations for Success training, formerly Back to Basics, for the future of meaningful adult day supports. My name is Leveland Taylor with the Office of Systems Supports and Standards, a division within DODD. We are so excited for this training today and hope that you will find it to be very helpful as well. I would like to go over a few housekeeping items before the training gets started. First, please be aware that this training is being recorded to possibly being posted on the DODD website at a later date. The tips for using Zoom. We have muted everyone at this time. If you wouldn't mind, turn your videos off. And when we go into the small groups, if you want to unmute, go to the bottom of your windows, click unmute, and go to the participant buttons, and you can unmute there as well. Please be sure to find the chat button at the bottom of your screens in order to receive credit for attending the session today and receive your CEU certificate. Please type in your full name into the chat at this time, please. Also, please use the chat to ask any questions as our speakers are moving through the general presentation. We will address questions as they arise. Speakers will present to the large group, and then we will break into smaller groups for further discussions for the last 30 minutes of the training. We will come back into the large group and share out discussion questions from the smaller groups. Our 5 speakers today are Keith Banner, Tom Hess, and Kyle Corbin, all our project managers with employment and community life engagement. We have Deidre Oley with Life Builders LLC, and Mary Thompson Hubbard with the Fuse Network. So without further ado, and from hearing my voice, strap your seatbelts on and be prepared to be truly enriched today by this training. Keith, you can take it away.
Thank you very much. Welcome everybody. Basically, I'm going to spend a few minutes with you talking about just kind of overarching ideas around this, and then we'll move into the Tom Hess right after me. So basically, the future is kind of now, if you really think about it, figuring out how to best connect supports with needs and futures, right? We're in a really kind of strange and maybe a time of opportunity as well, but with the pandemic, with COVID-19, it's made this statement that's right before you, I want a life, not a service, even kind of reverberate even more meaningfully now. So basically, how does a service or support help someone move forward while staying safe and healthy, obviously? And how do we use the supports we provide as a way to understand that forward momentum and benefit their lives from it, each person's life from it? That's really the core issue around all the HCBS waiver supports, but specifically today we're talking about adult day supports. So thinking about this statement, supporting people isn't about a program, it's about a life, and how that fits into all the stuff we are always talking about, person-centered planning, outcomes, all this stuff, especially around adult day. If you keep this in mind throughout the whole training, you'll probably have a good kind of through line to kind of connect to. I want a life, not a service, because that's really the core value we're trying to get at with all this talk and all this activity is, how do you help someone through the supports you provide have a life like a life that anybody else would have on earth, that's beneficial, that's good, that it has a lot of great stuff in it. So we move on to the next slide. Historically, services have been the destination, right? If you think about it again, the place has been where we're going, the facility. Now we're trying to figure out a new destination about the person, each person, him or herself. That's where the term person-centered comes in, right? All that stuff historically has always been kind of directed at the system. The destination has been, you know, where you do the programming. Now the destination is kind of geared toward, what do we want to make happen, and what does that look like? And this all comes from some shifts in federal and state information and guidance and rules. In March 2014, CMS established new regulations around the Medicaid HCBS waivers to make sure that everyone that accesses services through the waivers have full access to community living, which is the whole point of the waiver. It's kind of to help people not become a part of an institution or to deinstitutionalize. And then in response to that information from CMS, that guidance, that rule, Ohio set up a setting suitability rule that kind of took that idea and made it kind of manifest through what does the setting look like? Is it in the community? What's the most integrated setting? And so if you think about COVID-19 and this information in this slide, it kind of makes sense as we remove some of the rules, not remove some of the rules, make them more flexible, like through the STEP model or ADS in someone's home or virtual on behalf of. It's still the same definition of the service, it's still ADS, but we're trying to figure out how to do it in the community now in different ways so that we can get some benefits of the service that we couldn't get before, especially in this time where we're thinking about people's health and thinking about not getting COVID-19. We can go on to the next slide. Thanks. So this is the rule, right? This is like 5123, 2917. Basically, all this stuff I'm saying is in the actual definition of the service, right? The development of skills that lead to greater independence, community membership, relationship building, self-direction, self-advocacy. A lot of words, right? But basically, that gets to what meaningful is. And meaningful is the supports are used in pursuit of good things in somebody's life. And good things in somebody's life are the same good things that we have in ours. A job, volunteering, possibly, church, friends, finding out new interests, exploring new interests, digging deeper into the interests you already have, new traditions, all that stuff that we kind of pursue with our lives. We want to help people do that in the community, which is the whole point of the waiver. And I think, do I have it? Yeah, I think it's your turn. I think I did everything I'm supposed to. It's
excellent.
Tess's turn. So
great job, Keith.
Uh-huh.
Perfect. Thanks for handing that off. I'm going to spend a few minutes talking about community engagement and connections. All of the things that Keith was saying regarding the rules, regarding where we are as a system is right on, right? The key to this entire process is around person-centered planning, right? Every person we serve has skills and abilities that are unique to them, right? We need to focus on those skills and abilities and build them up so that we can move people into the community, right? Developing those skills and abilities through the services that we provide that are meaningful to the people that we serve. Not meaningful to the program, not easy to set up, not the most convenient, what's meaningful to that individual, right? Making sure that we're taking into account all of the support needs that individual may have. Because I know we have people on kind of all ends of the spectrum regarding support needs, right? We've got people where it's fairly simple for them to communicate what they want, where they want to go, how they want to do that. We have other people with higher support needs and maybe difficulty communicating that. Well, we really need to delve into that. We need to do some assessments. We need to work as a team to develop what those meaningful activities might be, right? All the while informing the people that we serve, right? Making sure they understand their options, discovering ways that they can contribute, and connecting them meaningfully to the community, right? We oftentimes in our systems and in our programs set up things that we think are meaningful. You know, I've always been surprised at how many people with disabilities love Walmart, how many people with disabilities love to go bowling, how many people with disabilities love to go to the drive-thru at McDonald's, right? I think there's a lot more diversity in our system and the people we serve. It's absolutely vital. Don't forget to mute. We can go on to the next slide. Excellent. So, and this is, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time looking back at what we used to do, But just to bring it out so that people understand, it used to be classes and outings and field trips where we were really being tourists in our community, not a member of the community, but a tourist. It was really something different than employment, not employment as a goal, not places on the path to employment, but something else. Sometimes it was a little nebulous what that was. It really was activities just to fill time when there was no contracted work in, say, a vocab setting. That's not what we're talking about going forward. And once again, that individual choice, making sure that it's not determined by the program, right? It's determined by the individuals. And then finally, it really was just an opportunity to hang out, right? Many folks had just had time to hang out and socialize with other people with disabilities. So moving forward and on to the next slide, this is what we want services to look like now, right? It's a way to connect people with their communities, not within our facilities or within our buildings. It's a way to explore the idea of working kind of at all times. Work in our society is really important for everybody, right? Whether it's 3 years from now or 3 months from now or 3 days from now, we need to keep that in mind as we move forward. It's also a way to build skills. Everything we do with the people we serve should be building those skills on a day-to-day basis. And it's a way to augment part-time work schedules. We know as a function of our experience working with people with disabilities, particularly in the employment first arena, our folks work about 19 to 20 hours a week. So that leaves a lot of other time to continue those skill building opportunities. What are we doing during those times when they're not working to augment their skills and build their skills so that maybe they work 25 hours a week the next time? Maybe it's 30 hours a week. Continuing that progression towards community integration. We can go on to the next slide. Once again, we talk about meaningful activities. Who are they meaningful for, right? It should be person-centered. The individual should be driving what we're doing every day. It's got to be purposeful and outcome-oriented, right? That's the importance of that person-centered planning team. Making sure that the SSA, making sure the individual, making sure anybody who's involved in that case has some input into what the outcomes are. We need to make sure that every outcome fosters activities in the community. That's the connection. And certainly in this COVID time, it makes it much more difficult, right? We need to make sure and capitalize on our relationships in our communities and not just be content to sit in our own buildings or stay at home, right? Maximizing those opportunities. Obviously, this takes a team, right? We need to make sure that we're accessing the funding from all sources. Right? If there's an OOD counselor, if there's a mental health counselor, if there's a DD person involved, making sure everybody's at the table contributing what they can. During this COVID time, we've had a great opportunity to see how flexible and responsive we can be. Right? I think the ODD's done a great job of loosening up some of the requirements, being able to be flexible, being able to make changes on the fly. Right? No more waiting until the annual service plan meeting to make changes. We should be able to make those changes almost immediately, right? And certainly in terms of old school thinking, you know, having changes within a week, that's immediate compared to waiting for 6 months or 6 weeks like we used to. Making sure that we're using positive instructional strategies in a data-driven way, taking advantage of the information we have, and I know Mary's going to talk a bit about this and Deidre's going to talk about it, using the data to make the decisions, right? Using the information that we have to determine where we're going to move forward. At all times, encouraging independence and self-reliance, right? That's absolutely the crux of all of this, is maximizing that for the people that we serve. And we can move on to the next slide.
Hey, Tom, could I have everybody mute themselves? We have somebody doing dishes in the background. Can you please mute?
Thank you. And once again, we're obviously focusing on strengths, not deficits. Our system used to be really focused on the deficits, assessing what people can't do, and keeping them out of the community. We want to focus on the strengths. We're assisting people to get a valued social role. And how do we do that? Right? By doing things we like, things we're good at, things we're interested in, making sure that we capitalize on people's skills, right? Whether it's being an artist, a dancer, a volunteer, an employee, a small business owner. It really does come down to that person-centered planning team to make sure that they're heading in the right direction. What is that role for that individual? What is it for Joe? What is it for Sue? We need to make sure that we're paying attention to their strengths, and that's how we're going to have success moving forward. We can go on to the next slide. I am going to turn it over to Kyle Corbin, who's a member of our team in the West Central region. Take it away, Kyle.
Thank you, Tom. So as we look at that, how do we do this, right? So how do you identify what those things are that people want to do? Because people don't know what they don't know, right? If they've never had these experiences before and you say, hey, you want to go fly an airplane? I don't know, never been on an airplane, barely seen an airplane. How do I know if I want to fly an airplane, right? Extreme example, but still, you don't know what you don't know. So we have to look at what are these people's goals in life and how do we help them identify that? So that's going to take some discussion with the individual, with the team, with the guardian. And sometimes, especially if folks that don't communicate very well, we're going to have to take some guesses, right? And try to figure those things out. And then we'll start with so we get an idea, right? We put a plan together, we formulate an idea. Here's what we think this person might be interested in. Maybe we've narrowed it down to 3 or 4 things. So we're going to try and start with short, quick trips, right? We'll go out, we'll give it a shot, and we'll assess how it goes. Did they seem interested? Did it go well? Did they want to get home as fast as possible, right? Those are some questions that we're going to be looking at when we do these trips. So based on that, we can pretty quickly determine whether this person has an interest in this or not. If they absolutely hated it, we know they didn't. But if they were engaged the entire time and they had fun and they seem to be enjoying the entire process, we'll put a check next to that one as something we'll continue to look at down the line. So before we get, so we have those quick trips, right? So we're also going to prep that individual on what to expect. Because again, if you've never had these experiences, you don't know what you don't know. Think about it from your own perspective. When you go into a new environment, maybe you go to a new church or to a new store, or even to a new restaurant that's a little different than what you're used to. What do you do before you go? You try to do some research about what expectations are before you get in there. So you're going to go online and you're going to look at what goes on in this place. You know, if it's a restaurant, what do they serve? If it's a trampoline park, you know, what are the rules? Whatever the situation is, you're going to look at what those things are. And so we have to do the same thing for our individuals. They may not be able to go on Google and look these things up. So we have to do that work for them. And we're going to prep that individual and we're going to meet them at their level. So do we need to use pictures? Can we show them videos of what things look like? Can we have discussion groups with members of the team or with peers that have been at this place before or have done this activity and let them share their experience? So if we're also going to use forgiving times, right? We're not going to go when it's the busiest. We're not going to go when it's the most chaotic of the place that you're trying to check out. You're going to talk to the business, the wherever it is that you're going. You're going to talk to them beforehand, find out what makes sense for when you're moving someone out there for the very first time. That's the easiest, most forgiving time to do. And that's when we're going to set up those trips. So for an example that we did, we were looking at how we could get some people out to the water park, right? We had some people that wanted to swim. They showed some interest in going to the YMCA. And we knew that a few of the guys that we had, so background, I worked at Montgomery Developmental Center. So we had some folks that were pretty difficult to serve. So we knew that we had some folks that wanted to go swim, and we knew that there may be some interactions with the public that would be a little confusing or difficult for the public to understand based on some of the needs of the individuals that we served. So we started with talking with the individuals about what the expectations were when we go to the YMCA. Here's what you're going to see. Here's a video of what the YMCA looks like. here's where we're going to park and here's how we're going to walk in, and this is where the changing area is. So like all the little steps so that people weren't caught by surprise. We talked to them about when the best time to go was. They suggested we go at 2 o'clock on a Wednesday. Perfect. So we brought our crew in, very small crew to start with. On 2 o'clock on a Wednesday, we walked through the process with them just like we had already planned, and we swam. Went very well, minimal issues, and we used baby steps to do that. So when we had the next group that was ready to come in, because we had 96 people who lived in DC, lots of people like to swim, we would bring in those peers that had already gone and that were able to communicate what those expectations were, to talk with those folks so that ease some of that anxiety. And we continued to do that 2 o'clock on Wednesday for months as we eased into understanding what those expectations were, and we had a good feel of how people were going to handle it. And we also saw who really enjoyed it and who didn't. And so those people that continued to enjoy it, then they progressed on to the next steps. And for those people that didn't, that was fine too. We just looked for other examples of things that they may want to do. But we started moving away from that 2 o'clock time and then moving into other times. And we joined some water classes, and we eventually got to where we were a very integrated part of that community at the Y, where they were always very excited to see us when we showed up. Now, this was a very slow process. It didn't start with yesterday, or, yesterday we're never going to the Y and tomorrow we're doing classes, right? Or even a month or 2 months or 3 months. This was a process that took over a year. And we moved at the pace that the individuals were ready for. And so when you're planning those services for yourself, same thing. Don't expect to make massive sweeping change and be completely integrated in the community tomorrow, right? It's going to be baby steps, and it's going to be tailored towards those folks that you serve. So let's move on to the next one, please, Katie. So also, as I mentioned, serve some folks that were pretty difficult at times or had some pretty difficult behaviors that we had to work through. Nobody is impossible to serve in the community. You just have to do the right planning, right? And so you got to have your worst case scenarios in place as to what's going to happen, what are you going to do, how are you going to handle this. So first off, you're going to have your policy and procedures manual. You're going to have those things already written out as to what expectations are in certain places. Everybody should have that already, right? We're going to do staff training annually, and not just your MUI, first aid, CPR, all of that stuff that you're absolutely required to do. But if we're truly going to work on integrating people in the community, we need to do some situational specific training, especially for folks that we know are going to have a little trouble out there. So role playing some scenarios, putting people in situations, and then walking through, what do we do when this happens? What do we do when this happens? What do we do when this happens? So that staff have a general idea of how they should respond, and they're not caught out there by surprise feeling like they have no help. Same thing with the next bullet point you see there, the cavalry. Having somebody that is available to come out and help, because we don't want to leave our direct service providers out there twisting the wind where they feel like they have no support if worst case scenarios happen, right? That's a great way to get people to say, I have zero interest in ever taking anybody out into the community again, as if they feel like they have no support out there if something bad happens. So even just knowing that you have some staff that are available that can show up, or a management staff, or whoever it is, that's how it's set up in your organization, that somebody can come and assist with this outing, with this community integration, with this job, whatever it is that that person's doing that you're setting up, but they have an additional person that's available that can come and support that staff so they don't feel like they're out there on their own trying to figure it out for themselves. You also want to have access to medical information and releases. So I can tell you what we did at the DC. When we went out on some of our larger trips, our larger community integration experiences, we had a 3-ring binder that we would take with us, that we would put in the pertinent medical information for the folks that were going. That way, if there was an emergency, if there was a case where we needed to take someone to hospital, emergency services were called, we had all of their medical information right there. Medications that they were taking, allergies, all of that stuff that is important was right there and easily accessible, so that staff weren't trying to remember it, because that's an unreasonable expectation for staff to know all that medical information for those folks. You also need to have an escape route or a quiet room, so that you can have a place for someone to go when things go bad. So let me give another example of something we did at the DC. We had a large group of folks that were interested, and by large group I mean about 16, that were interested in going to a play at the Victoria Theater, which is a kind of an older theater here in the Dayton area. And we knew that one of the guys that was going to go, he had an issue with public restrooms, and that he would go in and he needed to flush every toilet, and he needed to turn all the water on, and he needed to check the paper. And it didn't matter if it was the men's room or the women's room, or if anybody was in there or not, he was going in and checking it out. And it was one of his things. He had to do it. He couldn't help himself. It was going to happen. So prior to the event, we talked to the Victoria Theater staff, explained the situation to them, explained how the group that we were bringing and some of the accommodations that we would need. They let us come out early. We planned a path in from a different door so that we could get our tickets taken. We could enter into the theater without passing any of the public restrooms. We were still able to partake in the play, and we also had a plan for when that individual needed to use the restroom. They had a family restroom that was available, and they showed us a path that we could get to that without passing into the public restrooms at all. So we had an individual that at the very beginning of the conversation, staff said, there's no way we can take this person out because of these issues, these behaviors, these things that are going to happen. And we planned around all of those. We had our escape routes, and we had our pre-planning in place, and it was very successful, and we had 0 issues. So that whole ounce of prevention is a pound of cure is very accurate in a lot of these scenarios. So next slide, please. So we want to look at that big picture. So why are we talking about this? Well, you know, the examples I gave there, the goal is to be in the community, not just to show up at the community, right? So let me give a couple examples of what I mean by that and the difference between an outing versus community integration. So had a couple guys that love bowling, right? And as Tom said, you know, one of the things we do is we go bowling, right? Everybody knows this. I've been doing this for 21 years. Bowling is a big part of folks with disabilities. So but typically when we go, right, we load up our bus or our van, we go in, staff pays for the bowling, they get the shoes, they take care of the snacks that we've probably pre-packed. We get the alleys that are as far away as possible from everyone else so as not to disturb anyone or cause any problems. We bowl, we have a good time, we load back up on the van, and then we go home. So we went to the community, we went bowling, but we were not in the community. So how do we make that transition? Well, here's an example for a couple guys that really enjoyed it. So staff noticed that they were above and beyond excited when bowling time came. So they looked at some ways that they could do a little more. Well, these guys, they decided to join a league with some discussion and help from staff, and staff helped them set it up. And so they put a bowling team together and they joined a league. Now staff assisted with this as well. They were still there in case there was issues. And they had the opportunity to meet people that they wouldn't have met otherwise. And they made friends through this bowling league. And those friends that they made started inviting them to bowl with them as subs and on other teams. And over the course of the year, they made some really neat contacts. And so it went from just being, we're going bowling, to now I'm part of this bowling community where I'm now subbing at other bowling alleys and playing with other teams and meeting more people. And I'm now part of how this community of bowling works. And so very exciting for those folks. And so it doesn't have to be bowling. It really can be anything, right? So let me give you another example from my life. When I go, so pre-COVID, this is all pre-COVID stuff because everybody does this now. But when I go into the grocery, I have my list, I go in, I grab the stuff as quick as I can. I go through the self-checkout if at all possible. If not, I pick out the person who looks the least talkative, and I go through there because I don't want any interaction because I've had enough, and I just want to get my stuff and I want to go home. And that was my pre-COVID trip to the grocery store. If I didn't come to that grocery store, nobody would ever notice I wasn't there because I wasn't making an impression on anyone's life because I didn't want to, and that was okay. My dad, who goes to the same grocery store, he's a social butterfly there. He knows all the people that stock the shelves, he knows the managers, he knows the people that do the checkout, and he talks to them. They talk to him about his grandkids, he knows their family. It's a social event for him. Not anymore, of course, because of COVID, but prior to. So it was a big deal for him to go to the grocery, and he knew he was going to spend an hour or so there just socializing while he went and got the things that he needed. If he didn't show up for that grocery visit, or he stopped going to that store, people notice. they notice that he's not there anymore, and they wonder what happened to him, and then they start, reaching out to find out if he's okay, right? So he is part of that community. He has joined that community. He is connected to it. And so that's when I say, when it really can be anything, it's what are the wants and needs and likes of each individual person, and how we help them connect. So when we look at what our role has been for the last 30 plus years, we have been that caretaker. We're going to protect people, make sure they're safe, keep them apart from scary society where only bad things happen. And when we go into the community, we go in very isolated bubbles, we do our thing, and then we come back out. And we're very careful about how we do that. Well, we're changing that perspective away from caretaker to connector. We're going to help people connect. We become teachers as to how people learn to interact with their community and become part of it. And so again, it comes down to, though, is, are you respected and valued by others? Do people notice when you're not there anymore? If you stop coming, are you missed? And that's how you can tell the difference between being in the community versus being part of the community. So I'm going to kick it over to Deidre, and she's going to talk about some of the things that they do and how that works in their role. So,
thanks, Kyle. Good morning. Can everybody hear me okay? Thumbs up.
Sound good, Deidre.
Okay, thank you. So my name is Deidre Oni, and I work with Life Builders. We can go to the next slide. So I wanted to start with some history of Life Builders. I think it's very important that we talk about kind of like how we were founded. And Life Builders started in 2009, and it was started by Wilma Justice and Ann Kelly. Both of those women had very different background and experiences in the field of developmental disabilities. And actually, they really didn't have any experience. So Anne actually has a background in geology, and Wilma has a background in accounting. So they previously had not worked in the field, and they met at Westerville schools. So they actually met in the job training program there in the high school, and they gained experience working with students with disabilities. So when they worked with the students, they worked with, of course, high school students that were looking at possible upon graduation, gaining employment, but as well as students in the high school acquiring employment while they were there. And so I actually came on board to work with Life Builders in 2015. And unlike kind of Wilma and Ann, I had grown up and been in the field for a long time. And so I think it's really important when we talk about the future and really the foundations and what we're looking at for day support and meaningful day support. I always talk about this because Wilma and Ann had joked for a long time that they just didn't know any better. When they started Life Builders, they didn't have any experience other than being in the high school, and they really didn't know, what day service had already looked like previously. And I came on board and worked with them, and we talk about this, and it's kind of an ongoing joke because I say that it was a culture shock for me because I came from residential and I came from supported living and I worked in an ICF. And so I did have all of this experience, but coming to Life Builders, when I had met Wilma, we had worked at a previous position together. And I thought, oh my goodness, they are so progressive. They are really person-centered, all about the person. And it just really drew me to them. But it was, and I share this for people that are probably in the process of looking at what their day support options are going to look like and in their agency. But it really was a culture shock for me because I had worked in the field and I had known kind of, workshop type settings and those kind of things. And so it was really, I think that's really important to share because it was a really different experience, but I was really glad to come on board with them and work with them and kind of move forward as well. So you can go on to the next slide. So like I said, Life Builders was started in 2009. And at that time, they recognized that the competition for jobs, once the students graduated, really requires skills, right? So in each of our positions and any positions that anyone holds in the community, you need a certain set of skills to be successful. They also recognized that some of their former students were not either they had lost their position or they were not engaged in their community, whereas when they were in high school, they were. So I always give this example, and I think this is really something that, you know, I've seen throughout my experience, is that they worked with a gentleman who loved The Price is Right. Loved The Price is Right. And if it was up to him, he would sit at home and watch The Price is Right all day long, right? And so they had, you know, he had been employed, he was working at a hospital, he was delivering mail in the hospital when he was in high school. They thought that that would really transition outside of high school and he could be successful there. And they job coached him throughout his time working there. And then when he graduated, you know, he ended up, they said that he liked Price is Right, and he really said, that's, you know, what I want to do, which is wonderful. We all have things that we want to do. But then he ended up losing his job, which he loved, he formerly loved, and was sitting at home all day and not being engaged with the community. He had friends at the hospital that he had made, as well as just having that social environment and being around people and peers. And so that's really why they became life builders. They saw this that was needed with some of the students that they had previously worked with in the schools. All right, you can go to the next one. So when we talk about life builders, I really want to talk about staff support. So the biggest piece in what we do is the DSPs that we employ. So we believe that the culture of the DSPs determine the culture of programming, determine the success of the individuals, determine if the individuals are, you know, engaged in a positive manner or a negative manner. And we're really fortunate that each year we have a staff retreat. And in that staff retreat, we started this about 4 years ago, that we talked with our staff, our supervisors, and discussed, you know, if you're in those, kind of like what Kyle was talking about, if you're in those emergency situations and you're struggling, or if you're in a new situation and you're not sure what to do, how you can problem solve. What can you look to make a great decision with the people that we're supporting? Because those things happen, you know, and we do as well. We try to plan as much as we possibly can, but things do happen. We work with people. So we came up with guiding principles. The guiding principles were guidance from the directors and really looking at, all right, these are the things that guide us day to day. These are, you know, decision making. How can we make moral and ethical decisions, you know, on the spot? And we wanted our DSPs and our supervisors, when working with all of the individuals, to really have that support. And so they helped us come up with that. That really helped our employee morale. It boosted that because they had that buy-in from us as well. They saw our vision, and really it helped to move forward into what they were doing day to day. We do try to offer a ton of staff development and opportunities, any types of trainings and leadership. You know, the state does offer quite a bit of different things, which we love, as well as other partnering organizations. And we try to have staff be as involved as possible in those. And then we also offer opportunities for our DSPs to develop programming. So we do an in-house employability skills curriculum in our day program, and we want our DSPs to be involved in that. You know, all of our staff have such great gifts, and they have so many great things to offer. And so we want our DSPs, with assistance of the individuals that they're supporting, to come up with those kind of things. We want them to come up with ideas, and it's really helped us, you know, in order for them to be best supporting the individual in the best way possible too. So you can go to the next one, Katie. All right, so why are we unique? So life builders, and I'll talk a little bit, and I know that Kyle and some others have said, you know, prior to COVID, and that is, I'm finding myself saying that a lot. I was just in a meeting yesterday, I'm like, okay, well, prior to COVID, we did this, but now we're doing this. And so prior to COVID, we had hubs in Westerville, Sunbury, and Marion. And we do currently still have those hubs, but we have changed some of our services and how we deliver services a little bit differently since COVID has happened. So we did do some minimal HPC services because we did have a shutdown period. I'll talk about our business model in a little bit and how we really operate our hubs and connect to the community in that way. And now we are using more than just the churches. We are using different community spaces as well. And then, you know, since COVID, we have also offered the STEP program. So this is something else that we're offering, and that is just, you know, day services, but it's offered in the STEP model. We really like to keep a smaller number as requested by the members. So we operate, typically staff to member ratio is usually a 1 to 6. And that is something that really impacts our folks and, you know, what choices and everything that we can offer. We build our day program, and I'll show you a sample calendar here in a second, all based upon the individual. So the individuals actually, they come up with the choices and what they want to do throughout their day. And really, we think that that is, you know, we're individual focused at the very core of the program. They are driving their services and what they want for their life. We are really not focused on keeping people enrolled. And I know this is something that I personally, you know, have in my background have struggled with, because, you know, it was, okay, we got to make sure we have, you know, enough people to keep enrolled in the program and to make the bottom line and those kind of things. So it's really important that that is not our focus. That is not our mission, and that's not our focus. We focus firstly in our day program of employment and moving folks to possible employment, and really seeing the whole process of a person's life too. So it's not just, okay, they have to come to Life Builders Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or they have to come these amount of days. So we don't stipulate any of those things. We talk to them when they're interested in joining the day program or STEP or even in employment. We discuss, okay, what do you really want for your life, and what does that look like? And seeing the person holistically versus just at Life Builders. So we even have people that come to Life Builders a couple days. They might go to another day program a couple days, and then they might work a few days. And so it really just is based upon the individual and what they want in their life as well. All right, you can move forward. So this is a sample calendar. So the individuals in our day program, they come up with this calendar each month. And I think, you know, I think maybe Tom had said this before, you know, we do bowling. You'll see bowling listed on our calendar. You know, we do some of the things like they might want to go to certain places, but we try to give them, and staff try to guide them to be more open-minded. So we try to do, you know, more things than just what they're used to, because they might not know if they want to do something or if they like something. So we also, you know, the website will be up here at the end of when I'm done chatting, and go on there, check out our website. It's updated monthly with our calendar, and you can kind of see. And in talking about some of the things prior to COVID, you know, we really had a lot of different options as far as what we were doing in the day program. So it does look a little bit different now, just to help with the new guidelines and precautions in place. It does look a little bit different. So in talking about our day programming and really our focusing, we focus a lot on volunteering. And again, this has changed due to COVID, because some of our volunteering sites, so we volunteer in special education classrooms in the elementary schools. And so that has changed. And even now, with new updates from yesterday, that, you know, the schools in our surrounding area in Westerville are actually going to be virtual for at least the fall, that has changed. And so we have, since kind of getting back up and running, you know, after COVID, that looking at how has that changed, and also what can we do that would still partner with the community and still maintain that relationship if it's not just that in-person volunteering. We believe that volunteering builds so many skills. You know, all of those soft skills for employment, all of the job skills, it connects you with your community. We've had folks gain employment just because we have went and volunteered, and it's just it's a wonderful partnership that someone's like, oh, this person is a really, maybe they've never had experience with people with disabilities, but oh, this person is dependable, and oh, maybe this would be something that they would be interested in doing. And our folks, you know, and probably as you all know, I'm preaching to the choir here, but they love to give back. They love to do for, you know, people in their community. And so this is a really big piece to what we do, a big focus. All right, you can go forward. Focusing on practical life skills too, you know, looking at conflict. How do you resolve conflict between your peers? How can we help people, you know, they're going to have situations in all aspects of their life with their roommates, with their families. How can we do and practice these life skills in order for that to carry over to any piece of their life? So we role play. So we role play different scenarios. We talk about how we do things the right way and what is, you know, the engagement in our community and what does that look like, but it also the wrong way, because some people might not understand that, hey, this is not acceptable in our community. We do the employability skills training curriculum, and that's the focus on soft skills, independent living skills. So probably similar to what some folks have, that you guys do in your day program as well, emergency situations, community connections. So I think it is really important. We talked on one of our other calls about not being a tourist and how do you really get connected with your community. And I think one of the other presenters, and sorry, Mary, if you're going to say this here in just a minute, but how do we get connected? You know, one of the other presenters talked about, well, and this might have been in one of our group sessions, but talked about how do we personally get connected? You know, what groups are you involved in? And then also opening up the door to the individuals that we're supporting to get involved in those groups as well. So that is a big piece. You know, we don't want kind of the false pretenses of, you know, we go and we do this and we're very separate and we go and volunteer, but, you know, we're not truly connected. RAC, which is Random Acts of Kindness. Our folks love this. They do random acts of kindness for community members, even strangers sometimes too. So we want to include all of that. We do have the social piece to our program as well. So, and even those social aspects. So for instance, going out to lunch, those lead to connections. So we have a gentleman right now that we had, they had decided on where they wanted to go to lunch, and they went to lunch at a local Mexican restaurant down the street from our Westerville hub. And one of the gentlemen in our program were like, oh my goodness, this is such a cool place. He loved the environment. He loved the music. And he said, well, I would like to work here. And so we kind of did some discovery and, okay, why would you want to work here? You know, there's going to be more things except enjoying the chips and salsa. And what does that look like? And it ended up that, you know, we had talked to the manager. He had greeted us when we came in. And now that gentleman has a job there. So he comes to Life Builders a couple days a week to work on those employment skills. But then he works a couple days a week at the restaurant. And he's been there for 3 years, and we have been able to coach him. But it was that social connection that also, you know, was able to develop into a greater community connection. And it's wonderful because it's right down the street from his house. He actually bikes there every day. So it has been just a really good, perfect fit for him and what he wanted in his life. So you can go on to the next one. Like I said, we are an employment services provider. So we do through the waiver as well as OOD, and we do focus on employment first in our programming. This has been something too that, you know, I love the way that the individuals in our program really look up to their peers. And so we had a gal that works for IKEA. So a couple years ago when IKEA started to open here in Westerville, you know, she was looking for a position and we were helping her in that, and she gained a position at IKEA. And so she actually came in and she was our guest speaker in our day program, and she still attends the day program a couple days a week, and then she works a couple days a week as well. And she talked about all of the things that she needed to get her job at IKEA and what did that look like, and how at first she worked on this shift and she worked during the day, and then, you know, she talked with her manager because that wasn't really working out for her, and how to change that. And so those are all reinforced through our day program as well. And really, whatever the person is interested in and whatever they want for their life is another focus of ours. All right, you can go to the next one. So I briefly talked about this before. So this is our business model. So we are housed in churches. That has been our business model, again, prior to COVID. And now that has changed slightly. So we are still using some of our church locations, and some of our church locations are currently still closed. So that has been a challenge. I'm sure you guys are faced with some of those things as well in your organization. So we did have some churches that are still yet to open to any groups whatsoever. And so we would share the church locations with other preschool groups, homeschool groups. You know, one of our churches has a counseling center that operates out of there. So really, you know, kind of naturally placing us in the community. But this has changed. So we do have, we've had to seek out other community locations. So, and this is just a great, great story of connecting to the community and being connected naturally with people that you're surrounded with. We were doing one of our risk benefit discussion guides with one of our family members, and we were discussing how, you know, we're looking at getting started back up when we were shut down, but the church that we were operating out of, that hub was still closed. And so we were trying to brainstorm and figure out other ways that we could provide services. And one of our family members, their father said, well, you know, we have space and our church is up and running, and you guys could use that as a hub, and, you know, it would be perfect. And so it really worked out. And I thought, oh my goodness, this is such a blessing to us. And how wonderful was it that this just was a natural connection that we had. And so that has been a change. So we've sought out other community spaces since COVID has happened. And then, you know, utilizing the STEP model of day services. So we do have some folks that are not interested in really coming back to a group. And so we are providing STEP services to them. And that is based upon, you know, what they're interested in. So we do have some folks that are not morning people. And so, you know, we offer some STEP services throughout the day to try and meet their needs and wants. Administration. So I'm in my home office today. Our administration is very light. So when I talk about that, we don't have a building, a facility, you know, home office, anything like that. We run our offices out of our hubs or community locations. And this has changed too since COVID, because, you know, I would have meetings and work, you know, out of Starbucks. That's what I would do. We have everything mobile. So all of our documentation system is online, and that helps us really, when I think that it was Kyle talking about having that information at the forefront for your DSPs, making sure that they are well informed. That is all online and accessible. So that is something that is really, I think, has helped us even be further progressive for that. Diverse office space, I kind of touched on that. And then the flexibility with DSPs. And this has been a challenge too. We had, you know, those people that would react in, you know, the worst case scenario. We did have extra staff accessible for that. And so just with the new guidelines of making sure that we are not exposing people to more people and mixing of different groups and things like that, we've had to really rethink and reorganize how we have that flexibility with DSPs. So for example, we would have some people that would float between different hubs and different locations. And that has been something that since COVID, we've not been able able to do that. So we've actually hired some people in order to help assist with that. And then we just try to be flexible. We understand that everybody has families and lives, and we recognize that that culture is really important. And we want that flexibility with our DSPs and with our staff as well. We want them to feel that, we support them in the best way. So that's something else that is really important to just the culture of our program. All right, so you can look at us on Facebook. We have a Facebook page, and then there's our website, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions whatsoever. And then I'm actually going to turn it over to Mary to talk about her program.
Thanks for choosing to join us this morning. Can you hear me? Thumbs up, Deidre? Fantastic. I always get anxious when you can't really see very many people in the video. Everybody's got their picture turned off this morning. So I'm talking to the blank wall, which is always a challenge for me. Well, not too bad because it's pretty easy to talk. Anyways, I have the pleasure of being the director at the Fuse Network. We're actually previously the component unit of our respective county boards. So we merged together the three nonprofit units from Coshocton, Licking, and Muskingum County so that we could be just a little stronger fiscally and use more resources for quality of services and less resources on bureaucracy. So before I go to my first slide, just want to do a shout out to all of our team members across the Fuse Network. I'm talking today, but they're the people that do the work every single day. They're the people that are making all these amazing things happen. So thank you for choosing to be with us, and thanks, to our team for making these things happen for individuals. So we can go to the next slide. So when I came to the network, back in 2010, as the CEO is my first super big job. And one of my deliverables was to get more people to choose to come into our program. And with the expectation that if we could have more work in the workshop, more people coming into the workshop, I would actually get a bonus $5,000 at the end of the year. So I worked really, really hard on trying to figure out, how can we get more people in? How can we get more work in? And that was really my initial focus in the program. And then along the way, I was in Columbus and ran into a presentation by Tim from Starfire. And within the first couple minutes of his presentation, he said, yeah, we closed our workshops, we closed facility-based services, and we're supporting people one-on-one in the community. And I was kind of like, oh my goodness, what is he talking about? And so I literally spent probably the last 45 minutes of his session just trying to talk to my neighbors, saying, did he really say that? Are you sure he said that? And just really trying to wrap my mind around something that was so culturally different than the expectations within my CEO contract back in the early days. So that kind of planted some seeds in my mind to question what I kind of came into and what I had known within the kind of adult services world. Started talking to some of our team members and kind of saying, well, what would it look like if Carl didn't come here? And could Carl have more friends and more things to do if he wasn't so dependent on his relationships here inside of the workshop? And so people were kind of like, what are you talking about? Carl is our best producer. Carl works harder than anybody else in the program. He's an amazing, sub-assembly worker. And I said, but he's lonely. And so in the evenings and on the weekends, he calls the SSA hotline and says, I have a bomb in my backyard. And then we have all that paperwork that we have to fill out. And, he's just lonely. And so if he had a job that wasn't dependent on our paid supports every single day, would he create some new relationships, some natural relationships with his coworkers that would then extend outside of the traditional first shift? And as we started talking about that for different people in our program, it really started kind of making me question, well, yeah, that makes sense. Why would people come to one building just because of the common denominator that they had a disability, and not necessarily because of their life and their passion or how they could connect with others? And so we made the decision that we needed to help people not be inside of our building all day long, because we spent a lot of time just together in our segregated facility. So initially, what we saw was that staff were taking large groups of people out of the building, and we were saying, wow, look how successful staff member Bob is. He just took, 11 people out of the building. But in that group, there wasn't an opportunity for those individuals to form relationships with other people. And we found ourselves just doing a lot of entertainment. So we would go to the popcorn factory in Columbus and the chocolate place in Amish country, and we go to the buffets and eat. And we didn't do a lot of bowling because I kind of have a adversity already against bowling, even back in the early days. Always felt like, anyways. So we didn't do a lot of bowling, but we did a lot of trips of entertainment out into the community. And I was like, this is not going to get us to that vision. This is not going to get us where we want to be, because if we want Carl and Shakira and other people to create these social networks, we've got to do it in a different way. And so we introduced a concept of a tiered system where we really kind of said, entertainment outside of the building is good, but what's better is if we're doing something in the community that connects back to our outcome and connects back to what's important to us. And so if I have a passion for music, can we find a way to be out in the community, connecting to something with that passion for music, or gardening, or being around young children? So how could I connect for a purpose versus just being out of the building? And then we said that there's an even higher level of that connection. So rather than it just being the Hopewell group that's at the Humane Society, if we can get the Humane Society to identify, that's Shakira. Shakira, thank you for volunteering. Shakira, would you mind coming in on a different day by yourself? And that Shakira forms her own identity, that's really kind of what we're after. And so we started talking to staff about the differences, that there's these food, fun, and shopping trips that we're really great at doing, but there's really higher levels of engaging in the community and creating these valued social roles. So the staff were amazing, and like all these opportunities started happening, and I was looking at the budget and I'm like, this is horrible for the budget because there's not enough money. But it felt really great because Shakira got a job at the hospital and she didn't need us anymore. So she doesn't come into the program, and Carl's working at the car dealership. And, we were seeing close to 100 people a year get competitive jobs and not need us 5 days a week. And so the whole budgetary implications really challenges your commitment to doing what's right and doing the mission and doing what feels good. It feels great, but it's horrible. Let me say again, horrible for the budget. So we had this challenge going on, and so we started spinning people off to HPC services. So if David is going to volunteer at the child care facility and make connections there that are really one-on-one, we're not going to bill day services, we're going to bill as HPC, because that better financially supported what we were doing with the customized experiences. And so that helped our budget be okay. And honest truth, pre-COVID, we were okay. We were holding on, doing the right thing, feeling amazing about the success of the people in our program and how we were reducing their reliance on us, but also creating opportunities for us to focus more on some of the people in our program that don't have the same skills as Shakira and is not going to get a job in the community. But how can we help Samantha find meaningful engagement and connections in the community in a different way? And so it really helped us better define how we were providing our services. So the coronavirus hit, and wow, like the world explodes, our day program shuts down, people lose their jobs, like 71% maybe. I could look at the statistic, maybe it's 77. Anyways, in the 70s, percent of the people that we were supporting in competitive employment lost their jobs or were furloughed. So just a major impact on the budget. But then the department introduced the STEP opportunity. And so we immediately identified that that was the direction for us to go, because it really supported that service delivery model that we were doing pre-COVID without the financial reimbursement. And so we absolutely love STEP. We're trying to figure out how to better communicate around STEP, because people are still trying to block it into, well, I'm going to attend STEP Monday through Friday from 10 to 1. And STEP really has this dynamicness about it where it doesn't have to be 10 to 1. And how can we carve opportunities for that small group of 4 or less to really maximize the benefit of the program with this added enhanced rate that we're extremely appreciative to. So we can go to the next slide, because we have this like daily struggle of this is the vision, this is what we know is right, this is what feels good, this is the reality. And so Dewey was calling this morning and he's like, oh, you know, I'm assigned the wrong vehicle, because he needed a handicap accessible vehicle today instead of a non-modified vehicle. And it's all of these logistics that go into getting people where they need to go, helping people have the supports that they need. Zach didn't come into STEP today. His mom isn't feeling well. So that's one less person in that group. That impacts billing. So there's all of these challenges. There's road construction. So STEP in one of the groups started late today because non-medical took longer. So there's all these things that are distractions and realities of making the service delivery happen successfully that contradicts the vision of helping Zach and other people that are engaged in our services really have the experiences that they need to move forward on those outcomes that are so important to them. So I know I'm sure you have the exact same challenges within your program. And so we have a newer staff member, Amanda, who's on our team, and she was scheduled to provide a service a couple of days ago, and she's like, oh, I just don't know that I can do it. I don't know that I can take that group there by myself. I'm really fearful. And so coaching staff through saying, you know, you might run into some hiccups when you're there, but what can I do to help you feel confident to give those individuals the opportunity to have that experience? And so the honest truth is we sent a second staff person to be there for the first 15 minutes of the experience to help her get through that getting started part. And then the other staff person left, because we know that staff have to have the confidence in themselves and that kind of safety net or safety plan to say, well, I'm kind of nervous about getting it started, but once we get started, I know we can be successful there. So we added that extra staff person for the first 15 minutes of that experience. And so there's these administrative or logistic pieces that have to happen to better create those experiences that connect to the why we're doing it. And so it's a challenge. It's not even like a day-to-day challenge. It's really like a minute-by-minute, moment-by-moment challenge, because there's constant struggles to really provide programming that's not programming, because this isn't about programming, it's about life and experiences. And so how do you create life and experiences inside of a program that's totally focused on life and experiences? So if we go to the next slide. So it's really the why, like, why are we doing what we're doing? So if we have David volunteering with children at the child care facility, like, why? What is the purpose of David volunteering there? So is the purpose that he's building his resume because he wants a job in the future at the daycare? Or is the purpose for him to be around young people because he doesn't get to be around the young people in his family, his biological family? Like, what's the purpose? What's the why? What's the outcome? You know, why did we have Rosanna going to Clary Gardens? You know, and so the reality of Rosanna volunteering at Clary Gardens was not so much for Rosanna to build skills, but truly for us to have success, so we could circle back to Rosanna's mom, Cindy, and say, Cindy, I know you think that Rosanna just needs to come into the Hopewell program every day, but what we're hearing them say at Clary Gardens is that she is an amazing worker, and they would like to pay her to go there. And Cindy's like, oh, you know, we're Amish, and I'm not comfortable with that. And we're like, well, where would you be comfortable with Rosanna working? Because she has these amazing skills. And so sometimes it's that art of documentation, gathering the information that you can take back to a family or take back to the team to advocate for somebody to get something more, something bigger, something better. And it's really like good enough. You know, is this good enough? Because oftentimes our expectations are just too low. And so Rosanna never in a million zillion years would have complained. Her mom would never complain because they were just so grateful for the support that we were providing. But helping them want more, helping them see bigger and better. You know, Carl goes to the corporate Christmas program or party with his coworkers, and it's an open bar and an open buffet. And I tell staff to look the other way because they're going to have to write incident reports. So I'm like, take them in, drop them off, and don't look at anything because he's having these real experiences, you know. And so when Carl goes to his coworker's house to have dinner, and Carl goes to softball games with his coworkers, like that's life. And you know what? Carl's not called any more bomb threats in. Let it continue to be true. But you know, I mean, Carl has these relationships now, so he's not sitting at home lonely, getting drunk and doing bizarre things. So it's saying, how can we help people's lives be bigger and fuller and more of the things that are important to them? And it doesn't always just like happen on the first try. And so how do you front load staff to know the purpose or the reason that I'm taking this group of people here is this, and this is what it's going to look like. So if we're volunteering at the food pantry, the expectation is that Zach is going to be talking to some people and forming relationships with some people, so he can turn around and he can do an ask. And the ask is going to be, John, we've been volunteering together for a couple months now. Would you mind if I put you down on my resume as a reference so you could tell people what a hard worker I am, because I'd really like to get a job? And so the purpose is for Zach to find those references when he's out in the community. But the purpose for Katie is not to build her resume. The purpose for Katie is to find people that she can spend time with that's not a paid support, because Katie lives with a single mom and she has periods of time where she's alone at her house and she's lonely. And so she needs people to do things. And so can she go to that choir thing in the evening? And is there somebody that's going to pick her up for the Sunday brunch thing? And so it's saying, what is the purpose? So staff know why they're doing what they're doing, and that it's not just filling that 3 or 5 hour block of time of keeping people busy. I think I kind of touched on it, but I'll just say it a little bit more clearly. Yeah, that's fine. Totally go to that slide because I probably was rambling. They're probably giving me a clue that I've over allotted my stay. But you know, like just helping people be okay with failure. So some experiences don't work, but we learn a lot from them. And so I think it's helping staff and helping individuals and helping families know that it's okay if something doesn't work perfect, and that you're going to have hiccups and you're going to have blunders and you're going to have moments where you're going to be like, oh my goodness, I can't believe this happened. I just want to disappear. Well, you can't disappear. You got to live through the moment. And then when you become old like me, you'll have all these stories of saying, well, I remember the day when this happened, but look at the person now. Look at the person now. It makes it all worthwhile. So on to the next presenter. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mary, very much. I want to take a second and thank Deidre and Mary for their insight and kind of view of how it's really done. I know people on the phone might struggle with, wow, Life Builders and Fuse Network are way out there doing this. How do I get there, right? I need to be where they are tomorrow. And that's a daunting task because they've been at it a while and they're really good at it. And the key to that is step by step, right? You do this the same way that you eat an elephant. Sorry for you vegans out there. One bite at a time, right? That's how you eat an elephant, is one bite at a time. And you do this step by step, right? You make sure that you're staying in the places to belong, right? Look for those places in your community where you can belong. Find those places where you fit. Find those places where they get it. Oftentimes we in our field talk about people who get it, right? Kyle talked about finding those places that might be a little easier than the hardest place in your community to jump into. Find those places, right? Never stop listening. What you heard from Deidre and from Mary is that conversation is always going on. around services, around where you're going, around what you're doing. Make sure that you continue to listen. Listen to the feedback. Mary talked about documenting things. That's how you learn. You look at the documentation and you go, oh, this worked. Let's try that again. Or, oh, this didn't work. Let's try something different. One of the keys that I think we've really come into during this COVID time is collaboration. We've seen such a proliferation of provider networks and community networks and county board networks of people really coming together as a community to say, how do we serve Joe in the best way possible? It takes collaboration. It takes collaboration across agencies. It takes collaboration across providers and county boards sometimes. And then one of the things I think we really need to focus on sometimes is celebrating those successes. Whether they seem really small or they seem gigantic, we need to celebrate them. We need to send that message out to the community that we are being successful in the community. And then learning from those non-successes. Deidre and Mary pointed out, not everything works, right? Everything doesn't go off without a hitch. How do we document that and learn from that? We can go on to the next slide. I'm going to take just a couple of minutes and talk about the latest updates and where you find them. I think probably everybody's familiar with the dodd.ohio.gov website. That's where we've been providing all the guidance around day services, all the guidance around step billing, all the guidance about where and how we're providing our services during this emergency time. So certainly you should be comfortable going to the dodd.ohio.gov website and accessing the coronavirus guidance. If you have struggles with that, please reach out to your community life engagement project manager. Keith, Kyle, myself, Britta Huff, and Kelly Shuck are also members of our team. You can find that at the Ohio Employment First website, our contact information. We are certainly happy to help you guide through those updates. One of the things I like to do, and we always like to do, is provide resources. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see some of the resources that are available for additional information, right? Certainly, if you haven't, you will be comfortable with going to the My Learning section of dodd.ohio.gov. Increasingly, our trainings, our webinars, our series of trainings are posted on the My Learning webpage. There's some up there now about community integration with a webinar and a Meaningful Day webinar series. So no shortage of resources to get information about how to make this happen. Once again, going to the direct course modules. If you're not familiar with direct course modules, it's something also called Elsevier, if that rings a bell to you. Making sure that you access those courses, and those can be good trainings for staff. They can be good trainings for yourself. Certainly accessing that through dodd.ohio.gov around community inclusion, and specifically the You've Got a Friend. Direct courses, I think, got about 60 hours of training that's available. These are just a couple of the options you'll have in there. You can go to the next slide. Great. When we talk about resources for community life engagement, Loop Ohio. Hopefully, people are becoming familiar with Loop Ohio. It is Ohio's community of practice. We've got about 4,700 people in Ohio that take part in conversations around all things community life engagement, right? It could be benefits, it could be transportation, it could be transition, it could be grant funding, you name it, that conversation's going on Loop Ohio. It's free to people in Ohio to join, so please go on, join. You can either be active and engaged in conversations, or you can do what a lot of people do, is just lurk, right? Just look at those conversations and read the interesting information that's going on in that Loop Ohio conversation. One of the other things we do is we have resources in the community. We don't just limit this to Ohio resources, right? We know that the nation is struggling with this community life day services concept, right? These resources are from places around the country: Minnesota, Massachusetts, North Carolina, a number of different institutes across the country. access these resources. Take a look at what's going on around the country to get a feel for some of the things that are going on. I don't know where the inspiration is going to come from for you, but the more reading and the more resources you take a look at, the better opportunity you have to be successful. If these resources don't fit your needs, please reach out. We really want to be part of the team to help you move forward with this meaningful day services. I think I'm going to turn it over to Leveland to set up the small groups.
All right. Thanks, Tom. Great job. Great job, presenters. At this time, if you have a question, please write it in the chat. We will definitely try to discuss it after the small groups. So we're going to break up into small groups now, and you'll probably get an invite from a host. Click accept and discuss some information within the small groups. We'll see you in a few. Everybody's back in now. Great conversation in Deidre's group. At this time, I'm not sure if everybody's back in. I don't have that screen, but it should be back in by now. I would like to have each of the presenters who would like to share out some of the discussions that went on during their groups, and we give you all a few minutes to kind of each one to kind of share to the large group on what was discussed.
I can go first.
Oh, great.
That's cool. I had a great collection of providers. We all providers and kind of county borders, so it was cool. And a lot of us, the discussion was about what if folks aren't into it? What if this integration thing isn't like their dream? And so how do you get past that, and how do you dig down into actual real interest, no matter what that is, and move into it that way? And kind of latched onto Mary's why, right? Why gets you through a lot of that stuff. And the why will kind of help you drill down too, because basically we're not here to go to the movies every day or here to go to the baseball game every day. We're here to figure out interest and then act on it in the best way we can. And I think it was a good discussion.
Oh, great, Keith.
Great, and this is Tom. I'll go ahead and go next. I had a really good mix of county board and provider, and we really talked quite a bit about the diversification of services and that approach, right? Making sure that we're looking across the board at HPC, ADS, employment, whatever those interests are of the individual, and attacking it in that way and making the business plan accordingly. We also had some good conversation around creative approaches to doing that. A lot of people talked about their hub models. I think Deidre really pointed that out. I'm going to plug the Ohio Employment First website. There is a link under resources that will highlight the hub model. And it just left my brain, so I can't think of what exactly that is. It is the Integrated Community Supports Pilot Grants. There's a number of those programs in there that were a hub model. So you can go in and see their strategic plan and how they did it and their roadmap as how to get there.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks, Tom.
Kyle, I can go next. We had some good conversation about what do you do with high-risk folks, folks that we're not really sure how to get them out into the community, and how we can do that safely because of medical issues that they have. And And we also talked quite a bit about transition folks too. And we talked a lot about how we could utilize technology to kind of help build some peer groups and do some virtual soft building skills and kind of walk through what that might look like and how that might work. You know, it's certainly a difficult issue that a lot of folks are facing, and we could probably spend the whole day walking through some of those scenarios.
Thanks, Kyle.
And I can go next for our group. So we had a mix, again, with a couple providers and county board folks. And we had a provider that discussed how they were completely solely integrated into the community prior to COVID and how that's changed their model recently, because then they did establish a building, but just that worry of they didn't really want to kind of backtrack and regress. And so how they were looking at different services that they can provide at the step model as well. And then we did discuss how some of the county boards, I think it was like Greene County, another county that's left me right now, but they were sharing their resources for Zoom, and they were doing like a Zoom TV, and how that's been really successful, that they were able to have different individuals that knew each other, and that has been a success for them as well. And then just looking at how wonderful and resilient the folks that we support are, because we were concerned about coming back and wearing masks and doing those kind of things, and how folks in the different programs have really been successful. And that's been something to certainly celebrate. So really good discussion with our group as well.
Great, Deidre. And last but not least, Mary.
All right. So I just want to piggyback on something that Kyle was saying about trying to figure out the people that have more significant barriers and how to get them engaged. And that was one of our roadblocks early on, is that sometimes when we were having these conversations within our team about how we were going to help people have these lives of engagement in the community, we would talk about Chad and how are we going to help Chad? And I'm like, I don't know how we're going to help Chad. And how are we going to help Jesse? And I'm like, I don't know. And so we oftentimes gravitated to trying to figure out the most difficult people maybe to get these better lives of engagement first. And at some point, I think I read something from John Cotter. I'm positive, because I've read so much from John Cotter. But like one of the concepts is easy wins. And so when we came to those conversations within our team, we would say, you know what, we're not sure about Chad right now, but let's think about people that we can get some easy wins with. And so we looked at the people that were a little easier to get connected. And the reality is now, you know, Chad goes several times a week to a local facility and he kicks a soccer ball with some guys that are there that aren't part of our program. And that's how he's connected right now. But, you know, 3 or 4 years ago, like, we didn't know what to do with Chad. So oftentimes, if there is somebody in your program that's a little harder to figure out, by building your skills with some of the easier wins, it does kind of build that competency or capacity within your program to work on the people that you have to be a little more creative with. I was really blessed with a great group of people in my breakout, and they said a lot of really smart stuff that I can't remember exactly at the moment. But one of the pieces was the relationships between like county boards and providers, and how do you help everybody feel comfortable and not being perfect, and how do you help people share resources? And so I think it's continuing to be creative with those relationships, because where the relationships are strong, things are going really well for people. And if there's not a strong relationship, COVID has made it worse.
Okay. Thanks, Mary. I have a question. One of the participants had a question. Anyone can answer. The step model process. What does the documentation look like when it comes to the step model process?
So STEP is really just a billing code. Britta Hoff could say that, right? She says it a million times over and over. So STEP is really just a billing code. So your documentation for STEP truly wouldn't have to look any different than your documentation for vocab or ADS, because it's just a billing code. Now you do have to, when you're keying it into your system to bill, you do have to put in the ratio, like how many people versus how many staff, like that number has to be put in when you're billing it. And like we found, so I don't want to like speak out of turn, but we found like if somebody's in 2 virtual sessions in the same day and the ratio is the same, it's better to key it in on one line. If the ratios are different in the 2 sessions, then key it in on 2 separate lines. But your documentation for STEP should be the same as your documentation for ADS or vocab, because it's just a billing code.
Right. That's perfectly said, Mary. And I think the only thing that I would add to that is that the words that you're using in those same documents need to support that STEP activity, right? If it's virtual, if it's community, if it's in the house, it's just the words need to say what it is that it's reflecting.
Great. Well, I think that concludes our training. I want to thank all the presenters today. You guys did a really wonderful job. Hats off again. And I think all the participants were able to sit through and be enriched with all the rich information that went forth today. So that concludes today's training. Thanks a lot again, everyone. Have a blessed rest of your day.
Thank you.